Rachel. I think we can go ahead and start the recording and the live stream.
We are recording. I'm just waiting for the internet to do its thing and I will press record.
Thank you. Great, thank you, Rachel. Welcome everyone to the 9th installment of the Vision Zero Central Florida Safety Speaker Series, Tiny Vehicles, Big Safety Challenges, Planning for E-Micromobility. My name is Laura Bauk. I'm the Manager of Project Development at MetroPlan Orlando, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I am joined today by Angelica Rocha and Clint Sandusky. So Angelica has almost 10 years of transportation planning experience. As an active transportation and public transit user, she brings both professional expertise and lived experience to her work and helps agencies outline community visions that are safe, efficient, and implementation focused. Angelica has partnered with agencies across California, Florida, and Hawaii to institutionalize safety and advance multimodal transportation initiatives. She also serves on the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals Policy Committees, e-bikes, and Vision Zero subcommittees. Clint Sandusky is a cycling savvy instructor candidate and a certified cycling and traffic expert. Clint retired in 2016 after a 24-year career in law enforcement with both the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the Riverside Community College District Police. He was a bike patrol instructor and a member of the International Police Mountain Bike Association, where he served as an instructor and a member of the e-bike task force. Clint owns 2 electric bicycles and uses them to run errands, commute, race, teach, and patrol. In his retirement, he has moved from California to Idaho, but he continues to collaborate with organizations throughout the state of California. So during our presentation today, you will hear from Angelica about the regulatory and legislative framework around e-micromobility, as well as some best practices for incorporating e-bikes and e-scooters into our planning practice. I'll be standing in for Mike Wilson, who is out on vacation, and I'm going to provide some insights from bicyclist crash data related to speed and positioning on the road. And then Clint's going to wrap things up for us with some considerations when purchasing an e-micromobility device, tactics for safe operation on our transportation system, and some information about additional educational and training resources that are available. So since you've joined us today, you must be among the many who are struggling with how to accommodate e-micromobility in your community, whether as a transportation professional, an elected official, or a resident. Micromobility is not a new travel mode. It started to emerge as bike sharing systems in major cities around 2010, with traditional bikes shared through a system of bike docks within a city, which then evolved to dockless systems. As those systems evolved, they started to add scooters and ultimately electrified bikes and scooters. In more recent years, personal ownership of e-micromobility devices has surged, with robust sales projected to continue, especially as costs decrease. While these devices can serve as an important transportation mode, especially for those who owning and operating an automobile is not an option, we're seeing an increasing number of people being hurt or killed while using these devices, especially children who may not have a great understanding of the rules of the road. As we were researching this topic, we came across numerous news headlines relating to e-micromobility safety going back many years. When access to e-scooters and e-bikes was generally limited to sharing platforms, most of the headlines centered around recommendations for people to wear helmets and have some practice using the devices, especially the e-scooters, before venturing too far from a parking lot or other isolated area. As the design of e-scooters also evolved to have bigger wheels and other features that reduce some of those crash types. But now that access is expanded, especially to those younger people I mentioned who may not have a full understanding of the rules of the road, emergency rooms across the nation are seeing a surge in ER visits related to e-bike and e-scooter usage. We're going to drop a link in the chat to a recent news report featuring a pediatric ER doctor out of St. Pete here in Florida. I encourage you to watch this video when you have time, as it provides some useful context. The statistics that are shown in the clip are just from one hospital, but when we look at local hospital data, we see some of the same trends. Now that we've set the framework for why this is an important topic, I'm going to hand things over to Angelica, who's going to talk more about the policy landscape and strategies that can be incorporated into plans and projects.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. Really excited to share some insights from the recent work that we have been doing with MetroPlan Orlando on e-bike safety in Central Florida. Next slide. So a quick snapshot of what I'll cover here today. I'll start with what e-micromobility is, so really defining the topic and why the white paper came about. We'll also discuss how to consider devices in these transportation systems, provide a snapshot of the regulatory landscape, and highlight some lessons learned from agency interviews that we conducted across Central Florida, which led to developing the list of best practices for integrating e-micromobility. Next slide. So let's start with defining e-micromobility. Next slide, please. So e-micromobility is defined in the Florida statute as a device that is designed to travel between 15 and 18 miles per hour. This may include human-powered, so pedaling or pedal assist, as well as non-human powered, such as throttles. E-micromobility is really transforming the way that people get around. As Laura mentioned, these devices are making short trips easier, more flexible, as well as lowering emission. But this growth also brings lots of opportunities and challenges. Across Florida and the United States, use is really shaping travel habits. It's highlighting both longstanding issues in our infrastructure, providing safe access and opportunity and facilities, as well as issues in policy. And so these trends are promoting new questions for planners, engineers, and policymakers to address. And we were hearing from many folks across Florida the need to centralize all that information, and thus the white paper was born. As Laura mentioned, traffic safety is a key concern with e-micromobility. In Central Florida specifically, pedestrian crashes are declining, but incidents involving bicyclists and likely e-micromobility riders is rising. And so this really shifts kind of our need to target safety strategies and design better facilities. Metro Plan has taken a Vision Zero goal, and this exercise is really working to develop best practices for incorporating e-bikes and e-scooters into the system. And so this white paper really discusses in these slides here that I'll share with you today, we're defining e-micromobility as class 1 through 3 e-bikes, as well as scooters and mopeds. Also devices like mobility scooters, golf carts, or neighborhood electric vehicles, NEVs, were not included in this research, though sometimes are considered e-micromobility devices. Next slide. An important note or consideration as we move through these slides is that when it comes to design, e-bikes follow the same principles as traditional bikes. The recently released AASHTO Bike Facility Guide provides a comprehensive framework for planning safe and consistent, comfortable facilities. The AASHTO Guide, though, also really has an emphasis on all ages and ability. And so I think it's important that we sort of set the framework and understand that we've always had riders who operate at different speeds, riders who might feel more confident, able to move faster. And before e-bikes, that was really the strong and the fearless cyclist. And now many of those same dynamics are showing up with e-bike riders. So the key takeaway is that we have design guidance that can help design for different users, and we need to focus on different users rather than different device types. Next slide, please. So now that we've defined e-micromobility, we'll start with exploring the evolving regulatory landscape. So the current challenges in the regulatory landscape that we see for e-micromobility devices can be summarized into these two buckets. The first is the regulation of personal e-bikes or e-scooters is mainly set by the state. It's sometimes set by local laws, while shared fleet providers usually are managed locally. So there's kind of a difference between where regulations are happening for both personal and like service provided devices. The second is that the federal guidance on design and safety or testing is really currently limited. So this presents challenges for consumers as well as the enforcement officers. And we'll dig into each of these two over the next slides. So as I mentioned, rules vary by location. They vary from state to state, but they also vary across agencies within the same state. So for example, states in our countries have different statewide definitions. They class or group e-micromobility devices differently, and this can make it challenging for riders, retailers, and suppliers. So the states presented here on the slide, here in green, have enacted what People for Bikes refers to as kind of the model law, meaning that they define and regulate 3 classes of electric vehicles within the state's motor vehicle code. The state also gives similar rights and duties of an e-bike rider, same as normal bikes. And the states presented in red or yellow either have kind of similar, e-bikes are classified similarly to mopeds or motor vehicles. They have confusing language around the use, licensing requirements, even insurance requirements, and also have confusing language around whether e-bikes have access to bike infrastructure or not. Next slide. As you saw in the previous slide, though, Florida is considered a model for state legislation. And as of June 2020, the state of Florida classifies e-micromobility devices, so e-scooters and e-bikes, the same as regular bikes, and they can be used on roads, bike lanes, trails, and sidewalks unless locally restricted. There's currently no minimum age to ride, which differs from some other states, but there is a helmet requirement for riders 16 years of age and younger. The state law also allows for municipalities to govern their own affairs or impose stricter rules based on specific needs and use cases for each agency. So, in practice, this can look like agencies expanding in many different ways. So, for example, St. John County's ordinance detail specific passing behaviors if a rider is on the sidewalk, whereas Neptune Beach allows for riders to ride on the sidewalk as long as it's not reckless, which is specifically listed in the ordinance, and is below 15 miles an hour. They also have other restrictions for accessing or riding around beaches in the downtown core, and this is something common we've seen across Central Florida. Next slide. I mentioned previously that there's minimal oversight of e-micromobility device design, performance, and safety, and so this can lead to a couple challenges. First, devices really differ in power, speed, and battery quality. They also don't have any consistent requirement for labeling and lack regulatory clarity. So some e-bikes have stickers with classification, which makes it easier to enforce, but it's not a requirement. There are safety risks that we've seen. For example, we saw a couple years ago lots of conversation around uncertified batteries, which can lead to causing house fires. I think there's also a limited public awareness on the regulations. So technically anyone, any age could go and buy an e-bike, regardless if they have basic understanding of rules of the road or an understanding of age restrictions that might be imposed in their state. Next slide. So as part of the white paper, we wanted to understand what's happening or how agencies are enforcing and thinking about or establishing policies for e-bikes. Next slide. So we interviewed 7 agencies across the state of Florida, which included Florida Department of Transportation, Seminole County, and various cities like the city of Orlando, St. Petersburg, Tampa, and the University of Central Florida. These agencies were selected because they have high micromobility use, both of shared devices as well as owning personal devices, or they have implemented local policies and design practices to effectively manage e-bikes and e-scooters. Their experiences provided really valuable insights into how different communities across Florida are adapting to the rapid growth of e-micromobility. I'll cover some of the specifics in the next section. Next slide. So I started with providing information on defining e-micromobility and then introducing kind of the current regulatory landscape and how that's evolving. Now we'll switch to integrating e-bikes and e-scooters into transportation planning and engineering. And before I jump into kind of the basics on planning and design, I also wanted to share that we recently reviewed Bike Walk Central Florida's research and their best practices that came out as part of an advocacy letter, and just wanted to acknowledge that our best practices here align with that specific letter and are kind of woven into some of the suggestions that we're presenting here as well. So first, starting with kind of the planning framework. So how do we think about e-micromobility in our transportation planning? So some of the key planning documents are listed here and I think should reflect the role that e-micromobility devices play in local and regional mobility. So for example, active transportation plans, ATPs, or sometimes referred to as bicycle master plans, can identify strategies such as adopting an e-bike ordinance as part of the broader plan, or regional bike facility network planning can explore concepts like cycling superhighways, so longer facilities that are designed for higher speed riders and e-devices to improve comfort and connectivity. Next slide. So starting with policy recommendations, we've got 6 of them here and I'll walk through each of them. So the first one is really strengthening state and local policy alignment. Adopting a class-based policy is step 1, as we were talking about, kind of that map that illustrated the different colors for the states, and really making sure that the local level helps align and ensure consistency. And so I mentioned that one of the challenge right now is that it's difficult to recognize device types, and it's also difficult for users to understand the different policies that are presented in whatever state or county or agency that they're operating devices in. Advance? Yeah, thanks. Also wanted to acknowledge that improving crash reporting systems is really important. So as e-micromobility use grows, we need accurate crash data to understand what's happening. And so currently, most of the statewide collision forms, and particularly in Florida, don't have a field to identify e-bike or e-scooter involvement. And that makes it challenging for us to understand whether or not e-devices are being classified as pedestrians or if they're all being classified as bikes. And there's really inconsistency on where they are being classified. And so really exciting to hear that the state of Florida is currently working on adding a separate field for e-bikes and e-scooters. And so that will be able to better kind of inform some of our facility treatments and advance really the safety of these users. One other example I just wanted to share for crash reporting is an example from St. Pete. And so instead of, now our forms don't have e-bikes and e-scooters on them. However, St. Pete Public Works team and PD have a direct relationship that anytime there's a scooter related crash, the police officer directly reports the incident to the Public Works team. And then the Public Works team is using their own kind of database management tool to keep a record of scooter specific crashes. So we've seen some kind of workarounds within the current state's reporting system. So next, wanted to talk about regulating shared fleet providers. So these are kind of the Lime bikes and other sort of service providers that are popping up in many of the communities that we all live in. And so one of the best practices that we've really seen is establishing a permit system that manages both the fleet size and operation. We've also seen examples of agencies that are really requiring data sharing, and they're asking for data on crashes, speeds, and trip patterns, which really can be useful in planning for the local agency. Next one. Another policy recommendation is applying context-sensitive speed caps. So this is really location-based speed limits, and this can be focused on busy areas where there's pedestrians or near transit hubs and downtown zones. And in addition to kind of providing these speed caps, also kind of thinking about what other strategies such as signage and education can be used to inform users to operate at safer speeds. Next. Another strategy for policy is setting clear parking policies. So providing designated parking zones or corrals reduces sidewalk clutter. One of the strategies we've seen with vendors is requiring users to provide a photo of making sure that they're compliant in their parking. An example of this is Coral Gables in Tampa regulate both fleet side and device deployment, having specific requirements, making sure that the scooters are provided across the city. Next. And my final policy recommendation is thinking about minimum age requirements. So I mentioned that the state of Florida doesn't have currently a minimum age requirement, but we've seen some other states begin to consider and actually set ordinances that have specific age riders. So for example, in California, the minimum age to ride a class 3 device is 16. And there's also been additional ordinances and assembly bills that have been passed to further expand on this requirement. So for example, there was a recent assembly bill that was passed in San Diego County that actually allows agencies to adopt ordinances that provide specific restrictions on 12 years of age and under. And so we've seen a handful of agencies within San Diego County kind of adopt this, particularly in those areas where there's a lot of riders and a lot of riders of young ages. Next slide. So the next slide, I'm going to cover 5 programmatic recommendations for thinking about beyond just infrastructure and policy, how to best integrate safety and education around these devices. So the first one is launching a public safety campaign. So safety campaigns could be social media, working with schools, having yard signs to really promote responsible and respectful driving, and thinking about where to launch these campaigns. This is where crash data is really important. So we could use crash data to focus outreach on who's the most at need. Laura mentioned children and young adults being the most at risk. And so I think it's really important that we consider campaigns that specifically target these age groups. And some local strategies that we've seen is the Orange County Sheriff's Office developed a guide to mopeds, GoPeds, pocket bikes, and motorized scooters, and that outlines the laws, the age requirements, and details specific consequences if riders are operating with poor behaviors. Next slide. Something I'm particularly excited about is requiring training for young or new riders. So in addition to thinking about whether or not there should be a minimum age restriction, one of the key pieces is that many young riders have limited or no formal training about rules of the road. And so cities or agencies can think about offering or requiring courses to allow students to ride e-bikes to school. And so an example of this comes again from California, one of the agencies that's adopting a minimum age requirement. The city of Carlsbad actually requires a 2-day safety course for students in order to ride their e-bikes to school. And they actually receive a sticker permit that's on their bikes that they have to present in order to park their device on campus. So some interesting kind of programs that are coming out of that I think are worth considering. The next one. Additionally, when thinking about enforcement, it's important to think about whether or not there's an opportunity to provide safety course options instead of punitive tickets, and really thinking about what are the kind of key issues that officers are seeing and how do we provide education specifically targeted at that rather than a monetary ticket. Next. Another exciting thing that we've really been seeing is incentives to purchase. So expanding on these incentives really allows for devices to be more affordable and more accessible. Really exciting program coming out of the city of Tampa where they've provided over 400 e-bike vouchers and had led to 400 purchases just in the first 2 years. So thinking about how those types of programs can really lead towards more users on the road, and thinking about how to change our transportation network. And then lastly, the illegal batteries. I talked a little bit about this previously, but illegal or poor quality batteries have really posed some serious fire risks and safety risks. And so there's been some pilot programs where, especially in New York, where they're offering free swap-ins for unsafe batteries. And so these trade-in programs can then allow for better, safer, approved devices if this becomes an issue that is presented in your community. Next slide. So when designing for e-micromobility devices, we generally think about 2 main environments. And so I have recommendations specifically for each of these environments separately that I'll cover. But the first is we're thinking about the vehicular travel environment. So this is when the e-micromobility devices are in the road and mixing potentially with cars or in the same area as cars. The second is the shared pedestrian environment. So this is the shared use pass or trail network. And so each of these environments presents kind of different challenges and needs. And so thinking about how to safely coexist is one of the key pieces of the shared path, while also thinking about how to separate or protect within the vehicular environment is pretty important as well. So over the next 2 slides, I'll illustrate what those recommendations look like. Next slide. So when thinking about the vehicular travel environment, the first thing to think about is whether there's a wide or connected bike lane. And this really supports higher e-bike speeds and passing behavior, or allowing for passing behaviors. Next. Daylighting intersections so that drivers can see approaching riders. So an example of this came from Seminole County, where they're in the process of redesigning several hotspots around hotspots for crashes along their trail system. And this is particularly when the trail meets the roadway. And so what they've done is they've considered what's your line of sight, both as a trail rider on your e-device, as well as the line of sight for the vehicles approaching the intersection. So I think that's a critical piece, particularly when you're dealing with conflicts from a trail to a vehicle. Additionally, thinking about next, please. Yep. And next one is thinking about protected corners. And so protected corners reduce turning conflicts and improve visibility. I think this is a really important note because FDOT found that half of the e-micromobility fatal and severe injury crashes occurred at or near intersections. And protected corners can be designed to accommodate and separate these e-device users at the intersection. And I think they can be designed a little bit larger for cargo bikes or devices with trailers. And so we've seen that intersection safety is a really important piece and consideration. Next slide. The next slide, I'll cover recommendations within the pedestrian environment. And so again, thinking about the trail system and near waterfront, this is when these sort of recommendations become particularly important. And so one of the first examples is what we refer to as self-enforcing design. And really this is creating a system or a facility that slowing down feels natural. And so this could be done by curves or chicanes, or actually visually narrowing the facility in busy areas. And one thing we learned through our agency interviews that I was really excited to hear from was from St. Pete, who actually designs curves in a protected facility just before the intersection. And what that does is it illustrates a change. It forces kind of very naturally the rider to slow down as they approach kind of a conflict ahead. Again, at intersections, which we know are where a lot of the e-micromobility crashes are happening. Next. Another important piece is adding clear pavement markings and signage, really to separate both riders and walkers and to remind cyclists or e-scooter riders to yield and give audible signals. Next. And lastly, just kind of rounding out with this idea that we need to design bike corrals and docking stations so that they can accommodate both the e-bikes and e-scooters size and weights. And this is really important for keeping the sidewalks clear and accessible. I mentioned the St. Pete example where they're using kind of the curve just before the intersection to slow down the devices. They also are taking advantage of that curve and using that space to provide additional docking and parking. So thinking about creative strategies like that is really exciting. And that is the end of my presentation. So with that, I will pass it to Laura.
All right, thank you so much, Angelica. That was a lot of great information. As Angelica mentioned, everything that she just presented is sort of summarized in a white paper that we're pulling together that we expect to have available for public consumption towards the end of this month. So stay tuned for that. We can send out an email for those of you who are already on our distribution list. If you're not, I'll have some instructions on how to join the distribution list at the end of this webinar. I noticed that there was a hand up earlier. It has gone down since then, but I just want to note for those who have any questions, please do feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A box towards the bottom of your screen. There's a button, radio button, you can click on to that, get to that Q&A. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please go ahead and leave something in the chat and we'll see if we can help you on the back end. All right, so with that bit of housekeeping, I'm going to go ahead and do my best to stand in for Mike and share a little bit about how bicyclist speed can impact safety. All right, so we're going to get started with this animation that Mike created. So this animation is of an actual crash that happened along State Road 50 near Winter Garden last year. The e-bike rider reported that he was going about 25 miles an hour just before the crash and that his bike was capable of going up to 35 miles an hour. As you can probably see from the graphic, with all of that stop traffic, neither the cyclist nor the turning motorist could see one another before the crash, and the cyclist had nowhere near enough time and distance to stop at the speed that he was riding at. Here's a look at another crash that occurred along the West Orange Trail in Apopka over the summer. This one was a right hook crash involving an e-bike, where a right hook crash is where a motorist passes a cyclist, then immediately turns right across their path at an intersection or driveway, which you can see what happened with this crash. This one is an excellent illustration of the need for cyclist education and training and how bikeways cannot overcome all of the key factors that could lead to crashes. So for over a decade, Metro Plan Orlando has been collecting detailed behavioral information on bicyclists and pedestrian crashes through the state signal floor crash database system. And since about 2019, we've been counting bicyclists and pedestrians using MyoVision video cameras that allow us to count cyclists and note their position, direction, and speed. This combination of detailed crash data and bicyclist exposure information, allows us to gain a much clearer picture on the many risk factors that can lead to crashes. If we look at the general breakdown of how bicyclist crashes are happening, we can see that about 6% involve an overtaking motorist on the roadway, while about 60% involve motorists violating the bicyclist right-of-way. And then about a quarter involve cyclists violating the motorist right-of-way. Note that about 3/4 of motorist-caused crashes involving bicyclists using separated facilities, which include sidewalks. It's those crashes where motorists fail to yield that are the most affected by bicyclist speed. The most important crash factor is the direction of the cyclist relative to parallel motor vehicle traffic. Our data has shown that bicyclists riding facing traffic have a greater crash risk by more than 5 times than those who are going with the flow. On this slide, you can see that cyclists facing traffic on a sidewalk have a higher crash risk than those cyclists that are going with the flow, even in a regular travel lane. And then when we look at crashes that are involving motorists failing to yield to cyclists that are going with the flow of traffic, setting aside those overtaking crashes, we see something pretty interesting. Our sidewalk riders show the lowest crash risk, even lower than those using bike lanes. So the question is, why would sidewalk riders have a lower risk for the same types of crashes when sidewalks are neither designed nor designated for use by bicyclists? And the answer that we've seen is that sidewalk riders are much slower on average than those who use bike lanes or travel lanes. This slide shows the 85th percentile speed, or the speed that about 85% of cyclists are traveling at or below. So we're seeing that sidewalk riders are typically going less than 12.4 miles per hour, bike lane riders less than 15.7 miles per hour, and then our travel lane cyclists are generally going less than 18.4 miles per hour. So those sidewalk riders need far less stopping distance when a motorist violates their right-of-way. Our travel lane cyclists need 44 more feet stopping distance than sidewalk riders, and that makes for a crash risk that's twice as high. So stopping distance is the combination of the reaction distance, or how far you travel before you actually hit the brakes, plus your braking distance. This slide shows stopping and braking distance in 5-mile-an-hour increments. You can see here that a cyclist traveling 20 miles per hour needs about 32 feet more braking distance than a cyclist traveling 10 miles per hour. That's more than the width of a 2-lane street. So would separating e-bike riders or other faster bike or scooterizers improve their safety? Well, keep in mind that 3/4 of our cycling activity and 3/4 of our crashes already involve bicyclists on separated facilities. So what will happen when those sidewalk bicyclists speed up? We got an idea of the answer to that particular question during a study that we did of Silver Star Road. We found that Silver Star had a lot of those right hook crashes I mentioned before involving sidewalk riders. This was initially surprising because we found that sidewalk riders have a very low risk for a right hook crash. But Silver Star Road has hills, and most of those right hook crashes happened where the bicyclist was going downhill, shown on this slide with the green circles. So we measured their speeds and found that they were going 30 to 45% faster than sidewalk riders on level ground, and this increased their right hook risk 15-fold, and it increased their overall risk for all motorist-caused crashes 7-fold when going with the flow of traffic. We also speed come into play as a factor with shared use side paths compared to regular sidewalks. So some side paths have fewer crashes simply because they have fewer intersections and driveways, so they're dealing with fewer conflict points. You can see that with the leftmost blue bar. Our side paths with more frequent conflicts have even more crashes due to faster cycling speeds. As you can see here, side path riders are about 35% faster than sidewalk riders and have a 38% higher crash risk. Preliminary data over the last few years is showing a sharp increase in the percentage of bike crashes involving e-bikes, along with an overall increase in bike crashes overall. That increased speed of the e-bikes is likely responsible for some of that increase in crashes. So that wraps things up for me. And as Clint's going to discuss in his presentation, the faster you ride, you have to change the strategies that you're using to stay safe, which may mean changing where you ride. When on an e-micromobility device, an e-bike in particular, it can be helpful to think of yourself more as a slow motorcycle rider than as a pedestrian on wheels. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Clint to share a little bit on e-bike safety. So Clint, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Laura and Angela. Great information. And before I was a law enforcement officer, I was a professional musician. And so I can improvise, be a little flexible, because a lot of the, or at least some of the information I was going to present, Laura and Angela already have. So I'm going to be talking about, of course, e-bike safety, and that's from a retired law enforcement officer's perspective. I also do a lot of presenting to the bicycle community and industry as well. So I have a lot of varying insights. So I would like you to think during my presentation of these 4 statements, because they're key. Number 1, with great speed comes great responsibility. And I'm sorry, I stole that from Spider-Man. Also, the faster you go, the faster you can get in trouble. And I think we can all agree with that. Now, here's the next one you may not have thought of. The faster you go, the more you need to move left away from the right-hand edge of the roadway and control the lane. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the last one is, and I believe Laura kind of mentioned it, the faster you go, the more you need to drive defensively. So e-bikes, they're faster, they're more powerful, they're heavier. At times, they're less maneuverable. So these are all those 4 statements, factors we have to think about. And let's face it, we Americans like to go fast. Now, you can go faster safely and legally and responsibly, but you need to know what you're doing, including very good bicycle handling skills and understanding the traffic environment. All right, talking about speed, and I'll talk about this guide a little bit later. This is from Cycling Savvy. More speed requires more awareness, more space, and more communication. So we're all on the same page. I want to make sure that we all know what is an e-bike or what is a legal e-bike. Because in that first example of that crash in Florida on Colonial Drive, I believe it was Laura that was mentioning the e-bike rider was on an e-bike that could go up to 35 miles an hour. Well, that's not an e-bike. So first, let's answer the question, what isn't an e-bike? So it's not a moped. It's not a motor-driven cycle. It's not a motorcycle. And it's not a motorized bicycle. And it's certainly not this. Now, to preface this, this machine was actually, and they're out of business, thankfully, they were actually advertising and selling this thing to law enforcement. And on the right, you can see a bicycle officer wearing a bicycle helmet and gloves. They were promoting this as a legal e-bike. Well, it's not. They slapped on some pedals, what we call fake pedals. You can't pedal it. It goes 50 miles an hour. It's got a 5,000 watt motor, and it's 154 pounds. I think we can all agree this is not an e-bike. It's really an e-motorcycle. So in the state of Florida, here are some of your electric bicycle statutes. Because I'm a retired cop, so I'm into traffic laws and rules of the road. So in Florida, an electric bicycle means, and some of the key highlights, every class of e-bike has to have operable pedals. They have to work. And an electric motor less than 750 watts. And the e-bikes have to meet the requirements of one of the 3 qualifications. Class 1 e-bike is pedal assist only, no throttle. with motor assisted speeds up to 20 miles an hour. And you can see the statute right there under Florida law. Class 2 e-bike has to have operable pedals, like I mentioned. So you can pedal it, or it's got a throttle where it propels the bicycle exclusively up to 20 miles an hour. Now, Class 3 e-bikes, or we also call them speed electric bicycles, speed assisted. This pedal assist only, and the motor assists up to 28 miles an hour. Now, I want to mention one thing, because you've probably seen it out there. The combining of Class 2 and Class 3 e-bikes, or what some people call multi-mode or multi-class e-bikes, is not legal. By doing that, per federal law, your state law, and most state laws, that makes the e-bike no longer an e-bike. So you cannot have a combination Class 2 and Class 3. Although, sadly, manufacturers are out there producing them and selling them as legal e-bikes. Now, under this statute, and you can look it up later, I call this the kind of electric bicycle regulations catch-all statute, where Laura and Angela kind of mentioned some of the laws around it. As an example, within this statute, it does require on your e-bikes to have a label affixed in a prominent position that talks about the class of the e-bike, the top assisted speed, and the motor wattage. In the statute, it also talks about, and it's an infraction to illegally modify your e-bike, in other words, to go faster. Now, I really like this from Orange County Sheriff's. They make it quite clear in a recent Facebook post. They show what a legal e-bike is, and we talked about it earlier, electric motor less than 750 watts, and they say anything more than 750 watts is an electric motorcycle. Now, talking about Orange County ordinance, there's a new ordinance out on e-bike use. So you know, Class 3 e-bikes on any county trail are prohibited. Are people going to do it? Yes, but it's prohibited. So you can go to Orange County ordinance, municipal ordinance, and just type in electric bicycle, and you'll probably end up seeing a lot of these ordinances, including this new one. With that, in talking about electric motorcycles like the Surons, we're seeing more and more law enforcement agencies across the country, and this is an example in Irvine, California, in the other Orange County, where they're now towing these things, impounding them, citing the kids mostly, and calling the parents to come pick up the kids. So I can tell you, in parts of the country, including my state of Idaho, they're really cracking down on us. Now, my Orange County Sheriff's contact, he's an IPMBA instructor, International Police Mountain Bike Association, the best of the best. He said in Orange County, they haven't really seen a big problem with these electric motorcycles like the Surons, but they're monitoring it. If you ever want to contact any of the deputies, especially the IPMBA instructors from Orange County, shoot me an email. They are the experts, the boots on the ground, to ask any legal questions you may have from them. So please reach out to me. All right, roadway and path interactions. Yes, are there motorists out there that hate bicyclists? And if I experienced it, yes. But I have to tell you, based on my longtime cycling and traffic experience, these type of motorists are few. I believe most motorists are, responsible and aren't out there to get bicyclists. However, I say we still need to educate motorists. And on Cycling Savvy's homepage, Down below, there's motorists frequently asked questions. Why do bicyclists do what they do, like controlling the lane or, other questions? So a wealth of information for motorists to educate the motorists. Now, yes, there are concerns with e-bike use. And already previously mentioned by some of the presenters, there is more and more electric bicycle enforcement and restrictions going on, especially in California. And I think it was Laura that mentioned Carlsbad. The city a few years back spent $2 million to target their e-bike problem. And in fact, myself and some other instructors went down there to train the trainers, meaning train law enforcement to train their citizens. And they did see a decrease in e-bike problems. Sadly, and we've seen this in New York City as well, but this was up in Northern California, a person riding an e-bike on a Bayside path struck a pedestrian, and very sadly, the pedestrian died. Here's another situation in the Boston area from a couple of years ago. A 70-year-old cyclist, he was riding an e-bike, was riding in a bike lane, in a marked bike lane, and didn't know the dangers of what I'll talk about a little bit later, door zone bike lanes. The driver opened up the door, he struck the door, fell to the ground and died. Now, dooring is 100% preventable, and we'll talk about that in a second. So here we go. I don't know if you know this, but throughout the United States, there's 3 types of legal bicyclist behavior, with some restrictions here and there. Now, the beauty is, depending on your knowledge, your skill level, your comfort level, and the laws, you can practice one of these 3 behaviors. In fact, out on the ride, you can practice all 3 that I do. So the one on top is pedestrian behavior. If you're going to ride on the sidewalks, certainly not in crowded situations, you got to go pedestrian speed. And so what is pedestrian speed? 2 to 4 miles an hour. Unless you've got good sight lines, no conflicts like cross streets and driveways. So you really need to go really slow. The next one is edge behavior. Now that can include staying far to the right, up against the curb. It could be a bike lane. It could be a shoulder. And the bottom one is a driver behavior. Now the top 2, you can see all the conflicts there. The right hooks, underestimating a bicycle's speed. They overtake the e-biker and make a right turn or right hook, left cross. The drive out, especially bad when the bicyclists are facing traffic. And then the edge behavior, the same thing. Also with the edge behavior, we bicyclists can get sideswiped because motorists misjudge the passing distance, or we can get doored. So by practicing driving behavior, which is legal under many circumstances, you can see that bicyclist has a good advantage to see and be seen by motorists. It gives them extra time to react and do accident avoidance techniques. And you can see they're controlling the lane in the mid block. It allows the motorist to pass on the left. You're not going to get buzzed or sideswiped. And by controlling the lane where you see that parked car, by staying at least 5 feet away from that parked vehicle, either, if you're in a bike lane or there's just on-street parking, you totally avoid getting doored or being startled. So stay at least 5 feet away. But that means getting out there, safely merging, looking back, signaling, and controlling the lane, and you're never going to get doored. Mike wanted me to talk a little consumer awareness. So yeah, there are e-bike specific helmets. Now, this is a standard in the Netherlands. This is the Dutch standard. I don't know if it's in effect anymore, but you may ask, okay, what is a e-bike specific helmet? That means the helmet goes down farther on the sides and the back. It's got less air vents, so you have more of that life-saving polystyrene form to protect your head. And it's got additional safety feature like MIPS. There are some U.S. manufacturers that adhere to not only the consumer products safety guidelines for helmets, but also this standard. I have two e-bike specific helmets, so look it up. Hey, there's even e-bike specific tires, and I'm not going to get into it, but you can Google it as well. The e-bike Ready 50, that means the tire is more durable. It can last longer, more sturdy, and it's built for higher speeds, e-bike speeds. So you can Google that as well. E-bike tuning, you can Google that as well. It's illegal and unsafe and right out dangerous. So what is e-bike tuning? And it's against the law in your state and a lot of states. That's where somebody, and you can do it in various ways, including software, where you go in and you tamper with or modify the e-bike's motor to increase its speed. On a side note, it can also void your warranty. And Bosch, who I believe is the leader in e-bike motors, they're a German company. In their newer generation motors, they actually have anti-tampering software. So if you try to tamper with the motor, it kills it. And now you've got a 50, 60 pound e-bike, conventional bike. Good luck on running that thing. I talked about it earlier. Non-e-bikes, or, we say out of class electric vehicles. Yes, there are companies like Suron, but they've kind of backed away from that are falsely advertising and or selling these things as supposed e-bikes. So just be aware of that. Do your shopping. Go to reputable stores. Try to avoid online shopping. Sadly, and it was mentioned, e-bike caused fires. Hey, it can even happen to the police. This is from my state of Idaho, Coeur d'Alene Police Department. Two bicycle officers on e-bikes, I believe a Friday evening shift came in, parked their bikes in this big giant storage station. One of them plugged in their e-bike battery to charge, and it looks like they left. They left their e-bike battery unattended overnight. Something catastrophic happened. The e-bike battery went into what we call thermal runaway. It caught fire, it exploded, and it burned down their entire station. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But sadly, the Coeur d'Alene Police Department lost millions of dollars of equipment. And sadly, in New York City, we've actually seen people hurt and or killed because of e-bike fire. So follow your manufacturer's instructions. Never leave an e-bike battery unattended. So we're all in this together. And you can see here, there's a lot of different stakeholders. I believe that the ultimate line of defense in e-bike safety, especially for our teens, are our parents. And we need to educate the parents as to, is this the right time to buy their child an e-bike? Which e-bike is appropriate, including monitoring their behavior, and also involving all the peer pressure involved with riding e-bikes. So parents, then bike shops, law enforcement, schools, like was mentioned. Schools can reinforce everything the other stakeholders or partners are doing, including, like I think it was Laura, somebody mentioned, actually requiring the kids to take a safety course and show proof of completion before they are allowed to park their bicycle or e-bike on campus. I think that's fantastic. Bicycle and e-bike educational resources nationwide. I am heavily involved with Cycling Savvy. We have in-person and online courses. You can see the QR code right there. Talking about e-bikes, we have a very wonderful e-bike resources page. And you can see that right there. And there's the QR code. I had mentioned this earlier. This is the e-bike rider's guide to safety and etiquette, and it talks about sidewalks and side paths. Of course, we already talked about the speed component. You can download that and print that out. A very excellent resource for you. Give it to your friends, family members. Cycling Savvy, we do have an online e-bike training course for adults, very reasonably priced, as well as we have a teen e-bike course, also very reasonably priced. Now, within that, there's some articles, and you can click on that. Some key articles for parents is your teen ready for an e-bike? Very important for parents to consider, as well as choosing a safe and legal e-bike for them. So excellent, excellent, excellent. Also, John S. Allen, for 20, 30 years now, has been doing bicycling street smarts. We have a Cycling Savvy edition with the new, of course, e-bike chapter. I think every state should adopt that as their bicycle driver handbook. But you can pick it up online. There's the QR code right there. Also, talking about parents, Beth Black, and she's part of Cycling Savvy. She wrote a wonderful book called The Caring Parents E-Bike Survival Guide. She's in the process right now of writing a second edition, a must-read for parents. To be fair and balanced, yes, there are other programs out there on e-bike safety, League of American Bicyclists, People for Bikes, along with the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. I'm not quite sure how that relationship started. They have a course as well. Anybody that happens to ride, like I do, rides e-mountain bikes off-road, IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association, has ride vibes or trail etiquette information. And Tread Lightly, a few years ago, came up with e-bike right, tips for riding your e-bike off-road safely and legally. So some wonderful resources there. All right, I'll turn it back over to Laura or whomever else.
All right, thank you so much, Clint, and thank you to Angelica. Excellent food for thought from both of you as we're pursuing our safety goals here in Central Florida and beyond. So with the time that we have left, we're going to be able to take a few questions from our audience. We already had several rolling in. So I'm going to ask, actually, you've already done it, my panelists to turn their cameras back on. Thank you so much. I think you all have the hang of it because we've got a number of questions, but just in case, please use the Q&A button on your toolbar if you want to submit a question. We're going to get to as many as we can during our time together. And I'm going to start with the questions we've received so far. And while our speakers are answering those, please feel free to go ahead and add more to the list. So let's see. Let's start with question one. Where is the money coming from for these vouchers to be given and funding an individual's purchase of a consumer product? So Angelica actually already answered this one in the chat, but I'm gonna go ahead and read her response because it's great for those of you who are not looking at the chat. So voucher programs are generally funded through parking revenue, city general funds, and or state or local grant funding programs. That City of Tampa voucher program that Angelica mentioned specifically uses parking revenue funds and funds allocated in the city budget. Clinton and Angelica, anything else you want to add to that? We'll go on to the next one then. So question number 2 was any jurisdictions that have implemented speed limits for sidewalks? Are either of you aware? I'm not aware of any, but.
Well,
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Clint.
Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, so there are several agencies that have implemented speed limits for sidewalks. I mentioned Neptune Beach in my presentations. They have basically a not to exceed over 15 miles an hour. And then Orange County, which is currently adopting a new ordinance, but their existing ordinance has a requirement that devices may not go over 20 or 10 miles an hour. So I think there's a number of different ways that agencies have used speed limits, not just on sidewalks, but also in downtown areas, waterfronts, trails, etc.
Yeah, I was going to mention, Laura, the state of Florida is what we consider in the bicycle education community a local regulation state versus a statewide uniformity of bicycle laws like California. What that means for you guys in Florida, which is already mentioned, localities have much more leeway in establishing local ordinances. Therefore, we always recommend somebody, riding in a different city, a different county, always check online. If you can't find anything online, and typing in, Orange County municipal codes or ordinances, call and find out, because they can vary, especially off road. So you have to do your homework before you go to that city or county to see what their varying laws are.
Thank you. All right, so our third question is actually two. I think this will probably be for you to start, Angelica. So great information. Thank you for this. Two questions. First, does the white paper discuss the benefits of e-devices for the elderly who benefit from the motor assist? And also, does the white paper address educating motorists on how to change behaviors, share the road, and better understand e-vehicles?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So we did discuss the benefits of e-devices for older adults, and agree that's a really great opportunity to kind of help continue to allow people to cycle as they age. We mostly to answer the second question, we mostly focused on targeted audiences when thinking about education. So agree that providing education for motorists is definitely one strategy. I think from what we've included in our white paper was definitely more on the vulnerable road users. So thinking about kind of the youth and other kind of larger spread strategies. I think I'm interested to hear what Clint has to share on that, because I've seen from my desk that there's been kind of limited effectiveness on driver specific or motor specific education. I think it is an important piece, but not necessarily the most effective strategy. I think when thinking about how to use dollars wisely, I think focusing on maybe youth or other riders might be a better strategy to consider.
Well, Angela, I didn't mention in my presentation, but I talked about the three types of bicyclist behavior, and especially driver behavior. We can actually, depending on our type of behavior, whether it's edge, pedestrian, especially driver, we can affect driver's behavior, what we call and you saw that in the presentation, the 5 common motorist cause crashes, the right hook, the left cross, the drive out. And we believe at Cycling Savvy, by controlling the lane, we actually help motorists not commit those common cause crashes. Now, once again, it all comes down to your freedom to decide which behavior you want to choose, but driver behavior can help motorists do the right thing.
Thank you. Let's see. Next question. What is Orange County's e-bike policy for their parks? I think this is another one Angelica partially responded to already. They're currently in the process of adopting an ordinance for specific restrictions on their trail network.
Well, and Laura, I did mention under that new statute, and I don't see it in my notes, but that new statute, Orange County, like I said, Class 3 bikes are not allowed on county trails.
Right. Thank you.
Technically, technically.
Indeed. All right, let's see. Okay, so next question actually came in ahead of time. So the question is, can you describe how to address motorized vehicles, electric scooters, e-bikes, etc., from a county or city perspective on a multi-purpose trail that normally restricts motorized vehicle use, and more specifically, the higher speed of these vehicles? Thoughts on that? And then Catherine, I think Angelica dropped off, so if you want to turn your camera on, please do. Particularly if you want to weigh in on this one.
Yeah, on that one, it's challenging, and it really depends on in Hillsborough County, they do have, in other counties as well, they have speed limits set on trails, but then it becomes an enforcement issue. So I think it all just boils down to enforcement. And I think there were a few other questions in the chat related to that. So I think for some of these questions, we don't have all the answers yet, and we might need to do a little bit more research and get back to folks.
Well, Catherine, I can tell you, in California, their state parks system, the largest in the country, what they have done is either restricted e-bikes altogether from their state parks, or only allow Class 1 e-mountain bikes, which are pedal assist up to 20 miles an hour. I can tell you, I just found out Moab, Utah, which is like the mecca of mountain biking, they've opened up much of their trails, some of which are federal, to only class 1 electric bicycles. I think that's very appropriate, very reasonable. So I think we're going to see more of that. And just as long as, whether it's on the road, on side paths or trails, just as long as the user practices good, safe, legal, responsible behavior, we're not going to see, these trails restricted to e-bike use. Sadly, and the problem is, the community is not educated, like I talked about, these out-of-class electric vehicles, these Surons, these electric motorcycles, and they see those off-road or on-road, and they think immediately, oh, electric bicycle, because it's an electric motor. And so I think there's a lot of misconception. And I will say, I believe now the pendulum's changing. Yes, there's still a lot of legal e-bike problems out there, but like in California, in Idaho, and other states, we're seeing the majority of the problems now are these electric motorcycles, and law enforcement is starting to crack down, and in some cases hold the parents responsible. So, we'll see what happens.
Thank you both. All right, so this next one I think might fall in the category of we don't have all the answers yet, but one of the presenters mentioned pavement markings related to infrastructure recommendations. Seminole County did a great job using white high visibility crossings with green backgrounds, only to be forced to remove these expeditiously after they had been permitted by FDOT and in place for over a year on shared use trail crossings. As a frequent trail bicycle user, I noticed a significant difference in driver awareness at these green-white crossings. How can we get FDOT to reconsider this policy that doesn't allow green backgrounds on white crosswalks? Don't know that we have a great answer for that, but if you guys have a chance to weigh in, advocacy.
Yeah, all I know is there's a lot of people working on the issue and writing letters, providing evidence and support. So the more we can all just put some pressure on elected officials and FDOT and provide that evidence-based support, I think we'll hopefully in time we can see some change.
All right, our next question. Did either Seminole County or St. Pete note any local pushback from adopting these design standards that's related to the bulb outs and curb extensions, as an example? Let's see, I think Angelica noted this one as well. Her response was Seminole County noted that they collaborated closely with advocates early on in the design process for those treatments, including identifying the specific sites that should be redesigned. And then St. Pete did not mention anything related to pushback for those countermeasures. Okay. Our next question is, of the injuries and fatalities that occur at intersections, what role do automobiles turning right on red have in this statistic? What role do vehicles running through the stop line to turn right at the intersection have on e-micromobility injuries and fatalities?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I would say we don't quite have all the answers yet. But I know that Metro Plan Orlando is hiring an intern that's going to do a lot of crash typing and go through a lot of the crash reports to really pull out the crashes that were related to a e-mobility device. So in the coming years, we'll have much better data related to this.
Yes, that's correct. As Angelica mentioned, the crash forms historically have not included a box to note if you're using an e-micromobility device, but there is a new module available through Signal 4, which is where we get our crash data, where we're able to note those crashes. And so, as Catherine mentioned, we'll have an intern helping us to go back through the last several years of data and start to tease out some of that information. So we should have more on that to come.
Well, Laura, if I could follow up, once again, our behavior or our position on the roadway can affect those things at the intersections. As an example, the red light runners. We routinely train, whether it was when I was teaching law enforcement or the community, before you proceed on a green light or a stop sign, always to look left, right, left, and straight. I think most of the time that will allow the red light runner to get through the intersection. So that's kind of taken out of the ball game. As far as if you're stopped at a red light or a stop sign and a motorist overtakes you and makes a right in front of you, especially with large trucks, we call that the no-go zone or the danger zone. So if you just line up in the queue of traffic, you totally eliminate that right hook at intersections. And very sadly, with large vehicles, especially trucks pulling trailers, they swing wide. And we have it on our Cycling Savvy page on trucks. You may think they're going straight, but all of a sudden, deeper into the intersection, they turn to make that turn so their trailer doesn't hit the curb or some fixed object. And sadly, we've seen bicycles, including one e-bike rider, a University of California, Davis student riding an e-bike on campus, ended up colliding with a truck making a right turn. Don't know exactly what happened, but sadly, a lot of the time the bicyclist gets knocked off and a lot of the time gets rolled over and is killed. So just don't go there in the first place. Stay out of the danger zone or the no-go zone. And just like dooring, 100% preventable, 100% preventable.
Thank you. All right, you guys are doing fantastic with the questions today. I think we're gonna maybe take one more, and then for the ones that we're not able to get to, we will pull together a summary of the questions we received. We'll summarize the answers we've already given, and we'll provide responses to the questions that we did not get to. So we'll send that out to all of you who registered for this webinar. But for our last question, just because I think this might be helpful, does the white paper offer guidance on shopping for e-bikes and scooters and tips on purchasing safe vehicles and maintaining them? The answer is no on the white paper, but since we have you, Clint, I wanted to ask this question in case you wanted to share anything related to guidance on shopping for safe e-bikes and scooters.
Yeah, well, bottom line, buy legal ones, go to an authorized bicycle dealer, that sells, e-bikes that have that UL certification, and take one of two Cycling Savvy e-bike courses, either the adult or the teen course, and we get into that as far as purchasing safe and legal e-bikes, some maintenance stuff, which I kind of talked upon. So it's all on our website and our courses.
Okay.
And shop around, do your research.
All right, thank you, Clint, and Catherine. Thank you for jumping in. Angelica had to drop off a little early today, so Catherine's standing in, as you can see, for Q&A. Just want to thank all of you who contributed to the webinar today, and to all of you who are working to bring an end to traffic deaths and serious injuries. We truly appreciate your interest in eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries. It will take all of us working together to make it happen. A few housekeeping items. Actually, let me see if I can go back one slide. First, I just wanted to note really quickly that today's webinar is available for one AICP CM credit for those of you who are AICP certified. You can see the event number on the slide when you go to log your credits, or if you put in the title of today's show, you should be able to find it. And the recording of this webinar will be on MetroPlan Orlando's YouTube channel. A link to our safety playlist on the channel that includes all of the safety speakers webinars is in the chat, and this one should be added soon. If you have any specific ideas for topics that you would like to see covered as part of the speaker series in the future, please do go ahead and email your suggestions to visionzero@metroplanorlando.gov. We're also dropping that email address in the chat. And if you would like to continue to follow the progress of Vision Zero Central Florida or get notifications about future speaker series events or other Vision Zero events, please sign up for our constant contact email updates at visionzerocfl.gov. In the meantime, we hope you'll join us on this quest to reach zero traffic deaths in Central Florida and do your part to work for a safer transportation system. We can get to